We now come to the allocation of time motion. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Church of Scotland, Lord High Commissioner Bill, second reading.
Now.
Minister to move, second reading. Minister Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. I'm very pleased to open today's debate on this piece of legislation, and I hope it will have the support of the House. The Church of Scotland Lord High Commissioner Bill is a very simple, straightforward and clear piece of legislation, and it seeks to do one simple thing. It removes a legal barrier that prevents Catholics from holding the office of the Lord High Commissioner to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. This historic legal restriction only applies to Catholics and doesn't apply to people of other faiths or indeed of no religious faith. For those honourable members, if there are any in the House, who are not familiar with the role of Lord High Commissioner, perhaps it's beneficial for me to set out some context. The Lord High Commissioner is the Sovereign's personal representative to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. The person appointed is appointed as an observer to attend proceedings on behalf of His Majesty the King. The General Assembly is the governing body of the Church of Scotland, which meets each May in Edinburgh to hear reports, make laws and set the agenda for the Church for the coming year. The ceremonial duties of the Lord High Commissioner include addressing the Assembly at its opening and closing sessions, as well as attending the daily business on the Sovereign's behalf. In addition, the Lord High Commissioner undertakes official visits in Scotland, as well as hosting engagements at the Palace of Holyrood House. Historic legislation currently prevents the appointment of Catholics to this role. Specifically, the Claim of Right of 1689, which set out restrictions against Catholics being appointed to public offices in Scotland, including the role of Lord High Commissioner. Now, most of this was removed by the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829. That removed many aspects of religious discrimination towards Catholics. However, it did not explicitly remove the restriction against Catholics holding this office of Lord High Commissioner. And that means that there is a legislative restriction existing to this day against someone of the Catholic faith being appointed to this office. Now, until now, the issue did not arise because no Catholic was ever appointed to the role. But that position changed in December with the announcement of the appointment of Lady Eilish Angelini. And this bill will allow Lady Eilish to take up the role. There is a similarity with the approach to that adopted in 1974 in the Lord Chancellor Tenure of Office and Discharge of Ecclesiastical Functions Act, which removed restrictions on Catholics taking up the role of Lord Chancellor. The bill is short, as honourable members can see. It's narrowly focused, and it will deliver a small but important modernisation to allow Catholics to undertake the role of Lord High Commissioner. Yes, I'm happy to give it.
Thank you very much. I should declare an interest as a member of the Church of Scotland and also an elder of the Kirk. I very much support this bill, but the Minister will be aware that the Law Society of Scotland has suggested they would have preferred consultation before the bill was brought forward, and I wondered if he had any reflections on that. I think their particular concern was around wider religious discrimination on the statute book, which could also be dealt with as part of this process.
I'm grateful to the honourable member and for his support for the bill. I'll come on to the matter of the timetable that we've adopted here and by necessity have had to adopt. It is not always the case that legislation of this kind is preceded by a consultation. Some members may remember our late friend David Cairns, whose position in this House was facilitated by legislation removing barriers on ordained priests being appointed or elected to the House. That particular legislation also didn't have a consultation before it, as I understand it. If I could turn to Lady Eilish Angelini herself, whose appointment as the Lord High Commissioner for this year, 2025, will be facilitated by the passage of the bill if it proceeds. Lady Eilish has a distinguished background in law, justice and in academia. She was appointed Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire for services to the administration of justice in 2011, and in 2022 was appointed by Her late Majesty the Queen to the most ancient and most noble Order of the Thistle, and in this role she participated in the coronation in 2023. Lady Eilish has also been Principal of St Hugh's College, Oxford, since 2012, and was made a Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the University of Oxford in 2017. The announcement of her appointment as Lord High Commissioner was widely welcomed in Scotland. The appointment would make her the first Catholic to undertake the role of Lord High Commissioner, and Madam Deputy Speaker, her appointment would be a significant symbol of unity, goodwill and collaboration between the Church of Scotland and the Catholic Church in Scotland. It builds on the spirit of the St Margaret Declaration, signed at Dunfermline Abbey in 2022. This was a historic declaration of friendship between the Church of Scotland and the Catholic Church in Scotland. And the legislation before the House today builds on the spirit of that. And the Honourable Member referred to the circumstances and the timetable. I should say to the House, the legislation is on an accelerated timetable, and that is necessary to ensure that Lady Eilish's appointment can be finalised ahead of the General Assembly in May. We hope to have all the parliamentary stages completed by the end of next month, when, subject to royal assent, the formalities of the appointment can begin. That process would include a formal commission for the office, accompanied by a royal warrant, and the speedy passage of this bill is to allow those formalities as necessary to enable Lady Eilish to act as Lord High Commissioner and address the General Assembly at its opening and closing sessions in May. Were this appointment not to be able to proceed or to go ahead, this would be a setback to recent progress and be an outcome that I don't believe anyone wants, and therefore I hope that today's legislation can proceed with the support of all sides of the House. Madam Deputy Speaker, while the bill relates to the reserved matter of the Crown, I should say that I have spoken to the First Minister for Scotland and to representatives of both the Church of Scotland and the Catholic Church in Scotland about the bill and the desire to facilitate the appointment of Lady Eilish. And I'd like to thank all of them for the constructive and collaborative approach they've taken to the issue. I've also had the pleasure of discussing this matter with Lady Eilish directly, and I've no doubt that she will be an excellent Lord High Commissioner. Madam Deputy Speaker, to the bill itself, there are two clauses. Clause 1 makes provision to allow a person of the Roman Catholic faith to hold the office of the Lord High Commissioner to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. And Clause 2 sets out the territorial extent of the bill and the commencement, including that the bill will commence on royal assent. This is a small step to remove a religious barrier. Without it, neither Lady Eilish nor any other Catholic could take up this appointment by the Sovereign. The bill changes that and ensures that the announced appointment can go ahead. It is a short and a simple, but still in its own way, an important bill, and I hope it will receive a broad welcome and commend it to the House.
Yeah.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. I call Shadow Minister Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise to speak in this debate today. It is in fact a genuine pleasure. as a member of the Church of Scotland, to be speaking on what is an historically significant piece of legislation this afternoon, one that it could be argued is the latest piece of work which was begun with the passing of the very piece of legislation it seeks in part to repeal, the 1829 Catholic Relief Act, to ensure full equality for Catholics in our public realm. As someone who grew up not quite the son of the manse, it was 3 doors down, but very much in and around the Kirk, this is, in 8 years being a member of this place, the first debate on any issue regarding governance or the affairs of the Church of Scotland that, in fact, I can remember. Which, given that it is one of the 2 established churches of our United Kingdom, is on the one hand surprising, especially when compared to the hours we spend debating governance and issues pertaining to the Anglican Church, but then its privileged status as the established church in Scotland, underpinned by the Acts of Union and the Protestant Religion and Presbyterian Church Act 1707, has, since 1921, and the Articles Declaratory of the Constitution of the Church of Scotland, a part of the Church of Scotland Act, not required any UK or Scottish parliamentary oversight regarding church worship, governance, constitution, membership or office bearers, which makes today even more significant moment in the history of the Church and the nation. So infrequently are matters of the Kirk discussed on the floor of either of Scotland's 2 parliaments. Our relationship between Church and State in the United Kingdom is a brilliantly fashioned piece of British pragmatism, or possibly a fudge, some might describe it. Only in Great Britain could we have a head of state, whilst being supreme governor of one established church, the Anglican Church of England, also be an ordinary member of a completely separate Presbyterian church, the Church of Scotland. But we do, and no questions are asked. It is a piece of ecclesiastical deftness, one that would be inconceivable in any other country. However, it was one that I think we all would agree was carried out with ease by the late Queen Elizabeth, who demonstrated her commitment to, interest and knowledge of both churches throughout her reign, an interest, passion and dedication matched by our now King. And today, we see in what we are about to legislate for another brilliant piece of British pragmatism. To many in the outside world, the appointment of the brilliant Dame Eilish Angelilian to one of the most significant roles in Scottish public life will be rightly seen as well-deserved and a rightful honour for one as successful as she has been in her field and in Scottish and British public life. When you think about it, however, it nevertheless remains quite incredible that a practising Roman Catholic will represent our Protestant monarch, whose very first act as king, in accordance with the Act of Succession, was to take an oath to inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland and in prosecution of the claim of right, and particularly by an act entitled An Act for Securing the Protestant Religion and Presbyterian Church Government. Rightly, no questions will be asked about her appointment. There may, in fact, be some that possibly do question the appointment, but I think it speaks well to us as a nation, or 2 nations, that we are so relaxed about such an appointment today. It speaks to just how much Scotland, in fact, has changed. I do wonder if the Scotland of my grandfather's time, both of whom were born in Glasgow in the 1920s and both of whom went on to be Kirk elders, would have been as relaxed about such an appointment. Bear in mind, the Church of Scotland was formed out of the blood and fire of the Scottish Reformation. John Knox, in his revolutionary zeal, creating the only truly nationalist Calvinist church. It dominated public life for centuries, for better, especially in the realm of public education, and for worse, for too long excluding all other forms of Christianity and adherence to anything but the Kirk's form of Christianity from most positions of influence in public life in Scotland. The songs still sung at certain football grounds between fans of certain rival teams speak to a more difficult time in the history of Scotland, and indeed the churches in Scotland, one that sadly has not totally been consigned to the history books. Scottish public life, as I said, until incredibly recently, was a nation dominated by the Kirk. Its General Assembly, covered as the sitting of a Scottish Parliament at that point not in existence would have been. Its membership, when I was born, in the mid-1980s, sat around 1 million people, and its presence touched the lives of a great many more. Daily 5-minute slots on Scottish television, the late call, parodied so well by the late, great Ricky Fulton, the Boys Brigade, the Women's Guild. So many people had so much interaction with the Church. But Scotland has changed in so many ways for the better, and in many ways, however, the changes seen in Scotland have presented challenges for the Church. Church membership, which I said was just shy of 1 million when I was born, sits now at just over 200,000. The General Assembly, which, as I said, for many years sat as the one national forum in Scotland at which issues of importance to people across Scotland could be aired in public and debated, was covered as a sitting of a Parliament was. Since the creation of the Scottish Parliament, it has not engaged the same media interest as it did in the years preceding 1999. The decline in numbers entering the ministry and the reduction in footfall at church buildings across the country has seen difficult and at times heartbreaking decisions taken in regard to the sale of buildings and a reduction in the church estate. And yet there are huge positives also. In recent decades, we've seen the Kirk move with the people of Scotland and modernise, allowing women to become ordained back in 1968, some 24 years before the Church of England, has led to a huge growth in the number of women in leadership roles within the church. And the church has had multiple female moderators of the General Assembly, the first, Alison Elliott, in 2004. In 2015, the church allowed congregations to appoint ministers in same-sex marriages or civil partnerships. This was followed by officially approving of those very marriages and allowing ministers to conduct them in 2022. And whether it's through traditional church service, through outreach in their local communities, in Europe or across Scotland, through the Guild, cross-reach of the missionary work across the world, the Church of Scotland continues to touch and guide our national life in many ways. Religion in Britain is a funny thing. On the one hand, we famously do not do God. On the other, we have prayers before every meeting of our national parliament. On the one hand, unlike other countries, we hold our religion privately. On the other, we have bishops of one of our established churches sit in one of our legislators, our head of state, the supreme governor of one of our two established churches. What we are doing today will baffle most of those watching our proceedings, not least those who may not even know there are two established churches in the United Kingdom. But it is important, and it has the official opposition's full support. It demonstrates a significant gesture in goodwill and in the unity of two of Scotland's largest churches, building on the St Margaret Declaration of Friendship between the Catholic Church in Scotland and the Church of Scotland in 2022. It is yet another display of fantastic British pragmatism and the sensibleness that has underpinned how churches and the state have interacted over centuries. It only remains for me, on behalf of His Majesty's official opposition, to wish the new Lord High Commissioner well in her role, to thank the outgoing moderator of the Church, Dr Shaw Patterson, for his service over this year, to wish the moderator designate, Reverend Marjorie Frew, well as she takes up the role, and indeed to wish all those attending the upcoming General Assembly wisdom and patience as they deliberate on matters that mean so much to the national life of Scotland.
Alison Taylor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, like so many in my constituency and across Scotland, I have a lifelong association with the Church of Scotland. For so many of us in Scotland, the stories of our families are intertwined with local Church of Scotland parishes, not just through attendance on a Sunday, but through the marking of important life events, evidenced in so many ordinary aspects of community life, like the local badminton club in the church hall, summer fetes, jumble sales and coffee mornings. And the church in its role in assisting elderly and frail in the community, supporting young mothers, running youth clubs or in its commitments to international aid belongs to all in our communities. My own great-aunt was an organist in the church in Bishopton and in Paisley, in my constituency that I represent. My two children were baptised in the Church of Scotland in Paisley, and my husband and I were married in Drumclog Memorial Kirk in the member for East Kilbride and Straven's seat. But my sense of belonging to the Church of Scotland is no barrier to my appreciation of other faiths and other Christian communities. Indeed, the Church of Scotland has demonstrated a sincere commitment to ecumenical dialogue and in that effort, the Catholic Church have been willing and active participants. For more than 40 years, this has led to shared commitments to work together, notably in food banks and many other community support services with people from all faiths and none. I know how my life is enriched through friendships with people of other faiths, and so too the Church of Scotland have been similarly enriched. Today, for historic reasons that may seem odd to those following this debate, there is a legislative restriction against a person of the Roman Catholic faith being appointed as the Lord High Commissioner by the Sovereign to act as an observer on the Sovereign's behalf. Such restrictions do not apply to people of other faiths, or indeed of none. Changing this legislation is long overdue. I am therefore pleased to be able to support the Government in removing this unnecessary and unwelcome impediment to a Roman Catholic serving as the representative of His Majesty the King at the up-and-coming General Assembly of the Church of Scotland.
Yeah. I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a delight to follow the Honourable Member for Paisley and Renfrewshire North in a debate that I think, in the almost 8 years that I've been here as well, I don't think I've looked forward to quite as much and taken as much pleasure from. Not just because there is no party divide really to worry about, but because it feels that finally the church, of which I am no longer a member in Scotland, but was, is standing up for the sort of Scotland that we would all like to see and we all work towards. Although, as I say, I'm no longer a member, I was for many years, and my late husband was an elder in the kirk, not so very far from the Honourable Member from West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine's constituency. And it is a huge part still of community life in Scotland. That it's taken this long to overturn the injustice of the Roman Catholic Relief Act, leaving this one piece of discrimination towards Roman Catholics, is something that we should bear in mind, we should note, and we should promise never to allow to happen again. And although it's important that we get this legislation through quickly in order to appoint Lady Ailish Angiolini, I hope that we will address the wider discriminations which are left in Scottish society. But it is an important deal. Lady Ailish has been a role model for so many young women in Scotland. She was the first Solicitor General, she was the first Lord Advocate, she was the first Lord Clerk Register, and as the Minister mentioned, she has also been the Principal of St Hugh's College in Oxford since 2012. That she is also now the first Roman Catholic to have this post is also significant and further enhances her role as a role model. Everyone I've spoken to from the Church is delighted that she will be in this place, and I can only say that on this side of the House, on these benches, we completely support the Act and hope it goes through quickly. Thank you.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. That in 2025 we can say that no Roman Catholic has ever held the post of Lord High Commissioner does seem slightly absurd. There are, of course, other positions within this nation that a Catholic has never, and as matters stand, can never occupy. So it's good that we can break down one of those barriers today and reflect the extremely friendly relationship that exists between the Catholic Church in Scotland and the Church of Scotland, and indeed through the Interfaith Council with other faiths too. But it's also a mark of the high regard in which people of goodwill hold Lady Ailish Angiolini and the many qualities she has which make her a fitting representative of His Majesty. As we've heard by convention, the Sovereign is not normally present at the General Assembly, as technically he or she is an ordinary member of the Church and not its Supreme Governor, as in England. Traditionally, the Lord High Commissioner represents the Sovereign and is an observer appointed under the royal prerogative, which, as we know, means that there is technically no need for parliamentary approval or indeed for legislation, because the Lord High Commissioner is a representative to the General Assembly rather than part of the Assembly. It is not necessary for them to be a member of the Church of Scotland or indeed of any other church. However, the legislation we are considering today is necessary because the holder of the office cannot currently be a Roman Catholic. The Scottish Claim of Right Act of 1689 set out restrictions against Catholics being appointed to public office, with the 19th paragraph saying that, by the law of this kingdom, no papist can be king or queen of this realm or bear any office whatsoever therein. Harsh words, if I may say so. But the 1829 Roman Catholic Relief Act was the culmination of a long process working towards giving Catholics relief from the many restrictions imposed in Great Britain and Ireland prior to the Union of 1801. But the 1829 Act retained some restrictions on Catholics, most of which have since been repealed, but some significant ones remain. And that is the bill that we wish to amend today. It's perhaps unfortunate, as the Law Society have suggested, the Law Society of Scotland that is, that this bill cannot also be amended to remove the reference to the Lord High Chancellor from the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829, so that the 1829 Act can be brought into conformity with the 1974 Lord Chancellor Tenure of Office and Discharge of Ecclesiastical Functions Act. There's clearly a long history surrounding this appointment, with the first Lord High Commissioner having been appointed in 1580, and some significant people have held this post in the intervening 5 centuries, including a number of former colleagues that myself and the member opposite share. I'd name just the late Lord James Douglas Hamilton, Lord Wallace, Lord Steele and George Reid. And colleagues might have spotted something that they all had in common. That is, that they were all men. It was in fact not until 1970 when the late former MP, Peggy Ferguson, was appointed as the first female Lord High Commissioner. And we had to then wait another 24 years until the appointment of Lady Fraser to that post. Since then, the Princess Royal has held the post twice, and it would be good to think that following on from Lady Ailish's appointment, we might see women appointed more regularly. The appointment is expected to be made, we're told, on the basis of merit and contribution to society of the appointee, and Lady Ailish certainly qualifies on both counts. Now, perhaps should declare an interest here and let the Chamber know that I've known Lady Ailish since we were both teenagers and members of our respective schools' debating societies. I have to say, she was very much better than I was, and it was very, very clear, even then, that she was destined for a very significant future, if I can put it that way. But I also served in government with her when she was appointed by First Minister Jack McConnell as the first female Solicitor General. Ailish then went on to become the first female Lord Advocate and held both positions with distinction and was highly regarded during her time in office. Since then, she has served in a number of legal posts and is currently, as we've heard, the Principal of St Hugh's College, Oxford, and Pro-Chancellor of the University, and is also the first woman to hold the position of Lord Clerk of Scotland, another first for a woman. And significantly, I think, she is also the chair of the public inquiry into the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard. So I think we can safely say that Lady Ailish is an outstanding candidate for the post of Lord High Commissioner. Madam Deputy Speaker, I mentioned in opening that it is regrettable that in 2025 we still have laws on the statute book such as this, and it is. But ironically, the relationship between the two churches is in very good heart. The signing of the St Margaret's Declaration in 2022 by the moderator and Archbishop Cushley, as the representative of the Catholic Bishops' Conference, seeks to build on the common heritage of the two denominations in the Christian tradition. It recognises that divisions are still present, but seeks to mend those divisions and to focus on what they have in common. The passing of this bill today and the appointment of Lady Ailish to the post of Lord High Commissioner takes us on another welcome step on the journey of ecumenism. Thank you.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Glasgow West. And of course we welcome this bill, and the Government can be assured that we will do whatever we can to assist its progress through the House. But as we've heard from so many members this afternoon, the fact that in 2025 the United Kingdom is still having to introduce legislation to remove anti-Catholic legislation from the statute books is pretty embarrassing. That people of the Roman Catholic faith are still explicitly legally barred from holding the position of Lord High Chancellor of the Church of Scotland, a post which, as we've heard, can be held by people of all other faiths and indeed people of no religious belief, is a nonsense. And I don't blame the Government or the Minister one iota, and I'm quite sure that they were as surprised as anybody when, having appointed Lady Ailish Angelini to the office of Lord High Commissioner, one of their lawyers appeared when blowing the cobwebs off the 1829 Act to reveal the flaw in their plan. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it is ridiculous that 2 centuries after that Act was passed, the government are still having to introduce these narrowly focused bills in order to correct historical wrongs as and when they appear. And while I can understand that they were caught in the hop in regard with this particular appointment, I do share the frustrations of the Right Honourable Member for Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk, who said, it wouldn't have been better to bundle all this legislation together and remove all existing anti-Catholic discrimination rather than just doing it piecemeal as and when circumstances arise. Now, it may well be that given the time constraints of Lady Ailish's appointment, that would not have been possible. And to get round this particular problem, it was necessary for the government to do this in the fashion in which they are currently doing it. But I do hope that we never again find ourselves in this situation, and that the government finds time to bring forward legislation that removes once and for all traces of anti-Catholic discrimination from UK law. And I suspect that if the Minister was to approach his boss, he would receive a fair hearing, because as far back as 2002, when an aspiring young barrister, the now Prime Minister, writing in The Guardian, described the UK's remaining anti-Catholic laws as being deeply offensive and an offence to multicultural Britain. And I would like to think that should such a bill be introduced, that it would pass through this House quickly and without too much opposition. Of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's important to point out that this situation has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the Church of Scotland, who, to their enormous credit, have viewed the appointment of Lady Ailish to the post of Lord High Commissioner as completely uncontroversial, with Reverend Fiona Smith, the Principal Clerk of the General Assembly, saying, "We are honoured that His Majesty has appointed Lady Ailish Angelini as Lord High Commissioner, and we very much look forward to welcoming her to the General Assembly." And as others have mentioned, it is a remarkable transformation, because not so long ago the idea of a Catholic female, particularly one of Irish descent, being the Sovereign's official representative at the Church of Scotland would have been unthinkable to many in the Kirk. And I'm sure that the Minister will remember, although I don't think he was there personally, that it was only in 1923 that the infamous report that was presented to the General Assembly, entitled "The Menace of the Irish Race to Our Scottish Nationality." So for the appointment of a Catholic woman as Lord High Commissioner to be welcomed by the Church of Scotland is a wonderful example of how far Scotland as a nation has travelled in recent decades. But as the Minister has said and others have repeated, it should come as no surprise to any of us that if there was a trail to be blazed, that Ailish Angelini would be the person who was going to blaze that trail. Born Ailish Frances McFadden in Glasgow, educated at Notre Dame and at Strathclyde University, she became one of Scotland's most prominent lawyers, serving, as we've heard, as Solicitor General before becoming Lord Advocate, and serving both under a Labour and then an SNP government at Holyrood between 2006 and 2011, before being appointed to St Hugh's College the following year. She remained prominent in public life, has chaired several government inquiries, as we've heard, into deaths in police custody and the investigation and prosecution of rape. And in 2020, she published a report of a review into the handling of complaints against Police Scotland, before becoming chair of the Board of Trustees at Reprieve, a charity made of lawyers, investigators and campaigners fighting for justice for people who are facing human rights abuses, often at the hands of more powerful governments. And as if to cement her trailblazing reputation, in October 23 she became the first woman to be sworn as a new Lord Clerk Register of Scotland, one of the oldest remaining great offices of state, with origins going back to the 13th century. So given the circumstances, I don't think there could be a more appropriate appointment to the role of Lord High Commissioner of the Church of Scotland than Ailish Angelini. But as I said, it's deeply regrettable that because of our religious beliefs that we've had to pass a bill in this House to allow it to happen. And finally, given that this is welcome but long overdue, I'm delighted to inform the Government that should Lady Ailish, for any reason whatsoever, decide not to take up the role, that from this day on, I too are available for selection.
John Grady.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I say, the member for Argyll, Bute and South Lochaber has provided a most eloquent job application. I was very pleased to read of the upcoming appointment of Lady Ailish Angelini. Not only would Lady Ailish be the first Roman Catholic to hold this office, but she's also incredibly well qualified, and as a recovering Scots lawyer, someone who's held the post with such accomplishment of Lord Advocate and Solicitor General is clearly incredibly well qualified for this role. And may I say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that she is an example, and there are some in this House, of the excellent education you can get from state schools in Glasgow. The current law means that Roman Catholics at present cannot be Lord High Commissioner, and this bill removes the legal impediments to this, and therefore I fully support this bill. Lady Ailish Angelini is a practising Roman Catholic, and there has been much work to build closer links between the Catholic Church in Scotland and the Church of Scotland, and this includes the St Margaret Declaration signed in 2022. But as importantly, if not more importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's been much work between local Catholic and Church of Scotland congregations, and I've seen much of this work in Glasgow at first hand, pretty much every Sunday, and it is an absolute joy to behold. More widely, Lady Angelini's appointment is another very good example of the progress made between the two churches. Lady Angelini has said the following of her appointment, and I think it's something quite profound and we should pause and reflect on in the House. It is really important that people of all religions and faiths come together. The world is a scary place these days, and it is important that people of all faiths meet, share and promote peace and harmony. This is a good example of that. I could not agree more with Lady Angelini. I say that this bill is important because it is a demonstration of people of religions and faiths coming together in Scotland and putting aside their differences. And in Scotland and in Glasgow, many people, and across our family of nations, people of different faiths and of no faith work very well together for the good of our communities. And in Glasgow, we see many examples of this. We have one of the oldest Muslim populations in Glasgow, which gives greatly to people in Glasgow. We have a vibrant Sikh population, which dedicates itself to the service of the poorest in Glasgow. And the annual Holocaust Memorial Lecture at Glasgow University brings large and diverse audiences, including many of our Jewish brothers and sisters, to reflect on the terror of the Holocaust. People in Glasgow and in Scotland do work hard to understand each other, and religious diversity is a source of joy, energy and strength and beauty in Glasgow 850th year, and the appointment of Lady Ailish is a real profound moment in Glasgow's 850th year. All this, Madam Deputy Speaker, speaks to the words of the St Margaret Declaration. What we hold in common is often greater than what divides us. In these times, it is, as Lady Ailish suggests, important that we redouble our efforts for dialogue and understanding between people of faiths and people of no faith too. We should also at this moment celebrate the real progress we have made in our family of nations in this regard. This bill is one very good example, and I for one am proud to live in a family of nations that has had a Muslim First Minister and a Hindu Prime Minister, and I am proud to see this bill make progress in this House. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I think we only have one wind-up speech from the Minister. Minister Douglas Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a genuine pleasure to close this important debate. I should begin, as others have done, by declaring an interest in that I am a member myself of the Church of Scotland. I give my thanks to honourable members on both sides of the House for their thoughtful, measured and constructive contributions, in addition to their substantive support for this worthwhile piece of legislation. As we heard earlier from my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, this important bill will facilitate the appointment of Lady Ailish Angelini as the first Roman Catholic to hold the historic office of Lord High Commissioner. The bill will put an end to this statutory constraint, preventing someone being appointed to the position solely on the basis of their religion. We have heard in this debate a number of views and contributions from honourable members, to which I will now turn. Can I firstly thank the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, the member for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, for both the substantive support and the spirit of his speech to the House today. When it comes to the ecclesiastical deftness of which he spoke, I think the appropriate acknowledgement of the Kirk's place in our national life is surely more tablet than fudge, by which I mean tablet rather than the tablet, the esteemed Catholic newspaper. In all seriousness, the powerful case he made for ecumenical understanding in modern Scotland was well judged and surely commands support on all sides of the House. As he stated, thankfully, Scotland has changed. He also, as a fellow communicant member, spoke with knowledge, understanding and empathy of the Kirk's continuing work and witness guiding our national life. My honourable friend, the member for Paisley and Renfrewshire North, spoke movingly of the huge contribution, that contribution made by the Church of Scotland, not just in the now renamed Clyde Presbytery, but in local parishes right across our nation. I can personally attest to this. My grandfather, the Reverend Douglas Alexander, was a parish minister in Eaglesham in East Renfrewshire, and my own father was also the Reverend Douglas Alexander, and as my honourable friend knows, a parish minister in Bishopton, where she herself spoke of her family ties. That, I am proud to say, is now in her constituency, where my father served in that parish for almost 30 years. It is right to recognise the huge contribution of the Kirk to the life and work of communities right across our nation, and I am happy to do so from this dispatch box today. The honourable member for Edinburgh West brought a zest and an enthusiasm to this debate which I hadn't fully anticipated, but I hope seems merited in light of the contributions that we've heard. As the Liberal Democrat spokesman for Scotland, she described this bill accurately as an action standing up for the Scotland that we all want to see. That is a sentiment with which we would all surely agree. And the honourable member for Edinburgh West also spoke generously and accurately about Lady Eilish Angelini's genuinely pioneering role in our national life, a sentiment again with which we would concur on this side of the House. My honourable friend, the member for Glasgow West, brings to this House her experience of serving in the Scottish Parliament and indeed in the Scottish Government's Cabinet. That experience was reflected in her remarks in this chamber this afternoon, where she spoke with warmth and insight, in part born from a similar schooling at Notre Dame, about the suitability of Lady Eilish Angelini for the high office of Lord High Commissioner to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. I thank the member for Glasgow West for sharing these insights and concur with her view that Lady Eilish is indeed very well qualified for this role. In reference to her particular observation on why this bill does not remove the reference to the Lord High Commissioner from the Roman Catholic Relief Act, I can offer her the assurance that the reference to the Lord Chancellor in the Roman Catholic Relief Act was actually made obsolete by the 1974 Act. While I can understand the desire for, if you like, legislative tidying up, the scope of this bill is necessarily limited to the role of the Lord High Commissioner, and the position is clear. Following this bill, there will be no restriction on a Catholic holding either role. The honourable member for Argyll, Bute and South Lochaber offered his and his party's support for this bill, and we are grateful for that. Cross-party support in this House is a powerful symbol of our shared commitment to cross-denomination and cross-faith understanding in modern Scotland. He rightly recognised the time constraints under which we are necessarily operating today to ensure that Lady Eilish Angelini can take up this office in time for the gathering of the Kirk's General Assembly in the spring. And despite smuggling into his speech a late and, I have to say, rather unexpected job application, he rightly recognised Lady Eilish's cross-party credentials as a genuine trailblazer in Scottish national life. My honourable friend, the member for Glasgow East, described with characteristic eloquence how, and I quote directly, people in Glasgow work hard to understand each other. Religious diversity is a source of joy, energy, strength and beauty in Glasgow's 850th year. Of course, in this he is correct. Now, I should perhaps declare another interest in that Glasgow is the city of my birth, but it is right to recognise that after an at times troubled history of sectarian and religious intolerance, that today people make Glasgow, and those people are comprised of all faiths and none. I thank my honourable friend for his powerful advocacy of dialogue and understanding that brought to mind Joe Cox lately of this House, and thank him for his understanding and contribution to the debate today, a speech that was very much in keeping with the spirit of the St Margaret's Declaration. The debate today, Madam Deputy Speaker, has indicated there is support for this legislation across the House. I look forward to hearing further from honourable members during the remaining stages, due to follow shortly. With the support of the House, I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Under the allocation of time order of today, we shall now move to the Committee of the Whole House. Order.
Church of Scotland Lord High Commissioner Bill, Committee.
I remind members that in committee, members should not address the Chair as Deputy Speaker. Please use our names when addressing the Chair. Madam Chair or Madam Chairman is acceptable. We begin with Clause 1, which will be also convenient to consider Clause 2. The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill, and I invite the Minister, Douglas Alexander.
It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Madam Chair, and I open this Committee of the Whole House. Let me now turn to each of the two clauses in turn, Madam Chair, which will not detain the House for long, I hope. The purpose of Clause 1 is to make provision to allow a person of the Roman Catholic faith to hold the office of the Lord High Commissioner to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. Madam Chair, the Lord Chancellor, Tenure of Office and Discharge of Ecclesiastical Functions Act 1974 removes similar restrictions on individuals taking up the office of Lord Chancellor. The bill similarly removes the restriction on the Lord High Commissioner from the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829. Clause 2 sets out the extent, commencement and short title of the bill. The bill extends to England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The bill also comes into force upon royal assent. This will ensure that the upcoming appointment of Lady Ailish Angelini as the Lord High Commissioner goes ahead in the run-up to the General Assembly in May. Madam Chair, it is clear that this bill commands a broad consensus, and I am grateful to colleagues for their approach to this piece of legislation. I very much look forward to the rest of the debate today and to seeing this bill on the statute book soon.
I call the Shadow Minister, Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too will not detain the House for much longer, as I've expressed the full support of His Majesty's official opposition to this bill today, and it will not come as a surprise that we are not proposing any amendments at committee stage to this bill. I do have a question for the Minister, however, and it is, when does he expect this bill to go before the House of Lords, and can he assure the House and indeed the Church of Scotland that everything will be done to make for a quick passage of this bill up to royal assent so that it is passed in time for the upcoming General Assembly of the Church of Scotland?
Minister Douglas Alexander.
Sure, the Secretary of State that we want to make very expeditious progress. I'm happy to write to him once we're clear exactly the date in which it will be introduced in the Lords, contingent on support in this chamber today. But I can assure you that, as the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster made clear, we've been in regular dialogue with the Church of Scotland and with the other relevant offices, and we have every confidence that on the basis of the support that we've seen today, and hopefully in the other place, that we will be able to meet the timetable to make sure that Lady Ailish is able to take up her position by the General Assembly in May.
I don't see any further contributions. The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill. As many as their opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 2 stand part of the bill. As many as their opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. 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 Whip to report.
I beg to report that the committee has gone through the bill and directed me to report the same without amendment.
Third reading.
Now.
King's consent. The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Secretary of State Pat McFadden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. given the mood in the House, I don't intend to detain people long. By now we know the purpose of the bill, to allow Catholics to be appointed to the role of Lord High Commissioner to the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. That is the bill in a nutshell. Today's debates have demonstrated there is wide support for the bill across the House. I'd like to express my thanks to the Church of Scotland, to the Catholic Church, to the Scottish Government for their engagement and the collaboration in the development of the legislation. To thank all those who spoke in our debates, the honourable members for West Aberdeen and Kincardineshire, Paisley and Renfrewshire North, Edinburgh West, Glasgow West, Argyll, Bute and South Lochaber and Glasgow East, and my right honourable friend, the Minister who just spoke. I'm grateful to all of them. As we've said, at the signing of the St Margaret's Declaration at Dunfermline Abbey in 2022, both the Catholic Church and the Church of Scotland declared that what they held in common was far greater than what divides them, and that they would commit to continue working towards greater unity. I hope that this bill, in its small way, will continue in that spirit. The honourable member for Argyll and Bute referred to 1923 and asked if I was there. I wasn't there. But in the same year, W.B. Yeats wrote that peace comes dropping slow. And maybe equality sometimes comes dropping slow too. But today we have taken a small and important step, and I commend the bill to the House.
Yeah. I call the Shadow Minister Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too would like to record the thanks of all on our side of the House to those who have made possible the bill that we debated today, hopefully soon to become an act, the contributions from across the House, and indeed the engagement with the Church of Scotland, the Catholic Church, and Lady Ailish herself. I think we can all agree that this is a very positive step forward. It speaks very well to the type of country that Scotland is today. That certainly was not the case 100 years ago, and indeed express yet again my best wishes to the new Lord High Commissioner, to the General Assembly, and to all those attending their deliberations in their upcoming meeting in May.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. As many in that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Now we'll continue with some other business. Do the front benches wish to shuffle over, or are they content?